Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant and Founder here at Prairie HR Solutions. And in this video, I would like to take the the two select drop down boxes we created, the division and the job title, and connect them to our Google Apps script on our server side to filter based on a selection. So if this was finance, we want to send this value over to our Google Apps script side and then have it filter all of this salary data, pull out only those in the finance division, send it back over here, and then update this chart with only those employees in the finance division. And the way we're going to do this is we're initially just going to focus on having it filter by the division. And then we'll create another one to have it filter by the job title and then merge the two. Because the way our data is set up or the way a company normally runs is you can have, say, a customer service representative in multiple divisions. You can have one in sales, you can have one in operations, you can have one, in HR. It all depends on what your industry is and how you're structured. So instead of making these dependent drop down boxes, I think for now, what I'm going to do, my plan is anyway, is just to leave this with the full list of our job titles because we really don't have that many. Now, granted, if our job titles were getting into the hundreds, if we were a very large company and we had many different classifications with job titles and job levels, it would be a different story. But at that point in time, when they're large, um, certain job titles just inherently drift towards certain divisions. But in this case, we don't have that situation right now. So we're just going to keep it simple initially to do a function for the division and a function for the job title, and then uh, merge them after we get it functional. So if you think about the concept of the operations that we're attempting to do here, we did this already. We go over here to our operations page and just come down here and let's just open up this records management piece. We did something similar when we created these buttons here, these button spans that opened up our instructions. Each one of these button spans calls the same function, and that function determines which of these elements fired that event, created that event. So that's what we're going to do here in the same exact way. So let's come back over here to our page, and what we can do is we can just set a inline HTML function, an onChange function, to fire something and pass the event through our parameter. So if we go over here to our operations page, you'll see that I have a button here. This is the position button. And what we did was we used onClick, fired this function, and passed the event as a parameter. Now, we're not going to use onClick because our select boxes aren't a button. What we're really wanting to register is not the click, but the change in the value. So let's just grab this for now. Let's just copy this and let's go back over to our total rewards page. And let's find not our categories. Let's find our drop down. There they are. And what we're wanting to grab in terms of the change, what we're wanting to check for a change is this select piece right here. So what we can do is right after our ID is we can put that on click piece, but remember it's not going to be a click. We're going to make it on change. And what we're wanting to do is have it fire a function or call a function. And we just got to give that function a name. So let's just call this get comp filter. And we can pass the event, that's fine. Or pass the event as the term event. So let's copy this and give it also to this job title. Now what we need to do is create this function here. So let's go over to our total rewards. And we'll scroll all the way down here to the bottom. There we go. And we want to create that function. Well, not that function, not the whole thing. We want to create the function get comp filter. There we go. Get rid of this. And this is going to receive that event. And what we're going to need to do is check the event. And how we check that event, let's go up here to our operations JavaScript and find the code as a template, just so we don't have to recreate it. Although it might be quicker just to recreate it. All the lines of code we have here. Let's just recreate it. I don't feel like searching for that. So what we're going to do is we are going to need to create a variable to store whatever ID it is of that select box that fired this function. So let's just call this variable comp, since that's what page it's on. And let's just do filter select. And what this variable is going to be equal to is the event. And what we're trying to do is get the ID of the target that triggered this function, that caused the event. And how we do that is simply by that. So now we have this stored in a variable, not fillet. We have it stored in a variable, and we can run an if statement to check if that value is, or that ID is equal to either our comp division or our comp jobs. So let's create that variable. We'll go comp filter select. Since our ID is in the form of a string, let's make it strictly equal to, and if it's equal to the comp division, and this comp division is this one, then we want it to do something. And for now, what I'm wanting to do is simply give an alert and say comp division selected. We'll give it a space. And what we're wanting to do is also pass, we can pass this select just to see what's in it and how it's coming over. And then if it's not equal to this, we can give it a second condition to check. And if it's equal to comp jobs, which is the job title one, we can say simply comp jobs selected, and this comp filter should be comp jobs. And then if that fails, we need to give it something else. And right now we'll just say else do nothing. Okay, so let's save this. And then let's go back to our form here. We'll refresh it to pick up that code. And now when we select our division, we should populate that HTML alert. Yep, comp division selected, and this is the ID. Same with the jobs. Good. So now what we want to do is not simply populate the ID, we want to get the value of what's inside here. And if you remember, when we dynamically populated our select boxes from our Google Sheet, we set the value and the text content, what we're seeing here, as exactly the same. So we can just go and grab our value for each option. So how we can do that is create another variable. And let's just call this comp division is going to be equal to document get element by ID, and that ID is going to be comp division. And then we can do the same exact thing down here for our job titles, except this is going to be comp jobs. That's going to be comp jobs. Now, instead of running this comp filter, this can be comp jobs, and this can be division. Now, the only thing that we've done with this variable here is set the focus to that. What we need to do is get the value of whatever that is that the user selected. So we can simply add dot value to the end of this. So now when we save this and run it, it's going to say comp division or comp job selected, and then the value of what is in that box. So let's come back over here and give it a go. So if we select human resources, you'll see that it populated comp division selected, and then it gave us the value of that. And if we wanted to do marketing or operations, it would be operations, and then the same thing with the job title, as you can see. So good. So now we have the value saved. What we can do now is take this value and send it over to our Google Apps Script side to actually create and run the filter. And anytime that we run anything from our HTML side over to our Google Apps Script side, we need to do this, Google Script run. So I'm going to create a little bit of a space here between our pieces here. And what we want to do is we want to, I'll put it after it, that's fine. Google Script run. Now we're sending it to our Google Apps Script side and we're expecting something back. So we're going to need to do it with success handler. And the function that we're going to want to run on our Google Apps Script side is, let's just call it get comp div filter. And what we're going to pass to this over to our Google Apps Script side is this comp division, which contains the value of that select box. And then once it goes to a Google Apps Script side and comes back and returns what it needed to return, we need it to run another function. And for now, let's just call this function, let's just call it pop comp div filter. So let's create this filter here real quick, just so we don't, or this function here real quick, just so we don't have to do it later. And this function is only going to be temporary. Because if we think about what we're wanting to do is we are wanting to populate that chart with the data that we're sending over. And we already did that, so this is only going to be a placeholder function because we're going to want to send it somewhere else. We're going to want to send it to that chart to do something with. But for now, for testing, just to make sure the connections are fine and everything is functional, we'll just create this. So now let's actually go over here and create this get comp div filter function. So we'll come over here to our Google Apps Script side. And all the way down here to the bottom, function. Now we have quite a bit of code here, and we're going to have quite a bit more. And if you've noticed, what's ending up happening is our variable names are starting to get longer and longer and more descriptive. So even though we are sending over the comp division, we're not sending over necessarily the name. Well, we are, but really what we're sending over is the data that is stored in this name. We can call this anything that we want after we get out of this function and go to another function. And the reason I'm doing that is because we already have, if I remember right, let me just make sure I'm not fibbing here. Yep, see, we already have a comp division variable. So to keep things clean, we're going to give this a different identifier. The data is still coming over the same. It's just we're going to reference it with a different term. And let's use div value. And now what we're going to want to do is we are wanting to come up to this compensation sheet, to our compensation sheet right here. And we are wanting to get all of this data. And then we're wanting to filter this data by column A by this 0 index here, or this first column, based on whatever the value is that came over from our HTML. And in our previous video, we were kind of testing some things out. So we've actually already did this. So what we can do is instead of typing this over, this is a global variable, and instead of typing this over, we can simply grab this, also make this a global variable. We won't need this. And then this comp division we already used, but we are going to need this piece here. So let's save that. And then let's just make sure that we don't need anything else here. Well, we are going to need this. We'll come back for that. Let's just delete that because we won't need it anymore, because this is simply getting all the salary data. Okay, so we now have our variable that has our comp division filtered by finance. So let's just log this out to remind ourselves what this actually is. And what this is taking our comp data, getting that two-dimensional array of values, and then it's filtering it by this value here, by this term, finance. So if we were to save this and then run this function, you'll see that it's only giving us the employees within that finance division. And the reason it's doing that is because it's taking that comp data, that full data set, and filtering it by a row. And that row that we're filtering it by is at the index 0. And if that row is strictly equal to finance, then it's going to return that and create a new array, which is what we have. A two-dimensional array with only the finance employees, only those rows that have finance in that specific column. So good. So now what we can do is, instead of having it hard-coded in here with finance, we already have the ID, or not the ID, excuse me, the value of what it is that we would like to filter by. And it is coming to us from our HTML side, so we can simply pass that to it. Let's get rid of this log. So now what we need to do is we need to come over and ensure, essentially we need to rebuild our object like we did initially for all of our data, and base it on our total job experience, our annual pay, and our gender. And if you think about it, we already did that. What we did was we created a map of our total data set based on the row, and then we assign the experience, salary, and gender depending on what column it was. So this was the third index, so that would be that experience. The fourth is salary, and gender, of course, is that fifth one. So what we can do is just grab this and we're not actually going to return this comp data because that comp data is all of our data. What we want to return is the filtered piece of that data. So we can simply come in here and do that. So now it's going to return a new object based on our filtered data, which is using what is passed over from our HTML side, that value in that drop-down box as the condition. So now let's come over here and have our pop comp div filter. Now that it's receiving it and wants to run this function, let's simply have it present us. It's not going to present us the values. It's just going to say object, object, object. But let's go ahead and have it produce something here, just to one, to know that this function is being fired, but two, that it's actually getting something from it. So now let's save this. And let's come back over here to our page and let's refresh it. And let's do finance. We should get another drop-down box. And as you can see, it is a series, an arrays of objects, basically. Which is good because that means that there's something stored in this object. And of course, being an object, we would have to go in and say something along the lines of filter data dot experience, something along those lines, and then that would be able to produce a value or something like that. But right now we are getting data. Now when we come back over here to our code here, this is great, but what we're really wanting it to do is to populate into that that scatter plot. And that scatter plot, if we come up here and see actually what's occurring, one, it's fetching and drawing the data chart. So this is getting all of the data, which is fine. And then when it gets all that data, it's pushing that data to this process data draw chart. Now, instead of having a separate function to do all of this over again, we can simply call this function. And remember, this term here, this data term, is simply a reference point for us to use to refer to that data clump. So we can just simply come back down here to our script, and instead of calling that, we can simply call the function that is actually processing the data and drawing the chart. Because what's going to end up happening is, instead of our Google Apps script side coming over here and then when it returns this, it's going to push it to this function, and this function has a way of accepting it already, and we're just calling it data. So this data can be changed depending on what function is feeding it. So let's save this and see what actually happens. See if we messed anything up here. Or if we get it right off the bat, which we should get it right off the bat. Okay, so this isn't populating, and I'm curious as to why it's not populating, but I have an idea. Let's come back over here. Okay, so let's save that. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking to make sure that we haven't actually created an error. Nope, that one's running fine. So let's run our salary data and see if this has already been triggered. Nope, that's fine. So there's our get salary data. Okay, so now let's come back over here and actually see what is occurring. Okay, no idea. I think getting rid of that repeated variable did the trick. So this is all of our employees, every single one of them. So now, if we did everything correctly, what will happen is if we choose a division, this chart here should populate with that filtered data. So let's just choose finance. Oh, got to get rid of these boxes here. Okay, good. So now we only have the finance employees. Let's choose finance has some work, obviously. Let's choose human resources. And then just to give us another one, let's do sales. I don't think we have that many employees in sales, but I lied. I guess we do. Sales isn't looking too bad, I guess, sort of. But we have now essentially created a way to function the data that is being populated through a drop down filter. And you'll notice that I just reset this to choose. So if we select choose, what we would like to have happen is everything to populate. So let's actually do that here real quick. So if it doesn't equal comp division or comp jobs, or it essentially equals, if it's not the select box that fired it, what we will need to do is build in yet another if statement to check the values of that just to see if it is choose. And then if it's choose, we will just have it run this function right here, fetch data and chart. And then if it's not choose, then we will essentially run everything. So let's go ahead and type that in here real quick. So what we can build, let's get rid of this alert. And what we can do in here is simply put if comp division equals choose dot dot dot. Let's make sure that it's a dot dot dot. Yes, it is. Then what we would like to do is have it run this function right here. Right here. My apologies. This one. So essentially that's just going to run everything all over again. And then else it's going to run this. And then what we can do is copy the same thing here. When we get ready to build out our filter. So I'm going to end this video here as soon as we test this out. Let's put this as jobs. Let's test it out here real quick just to make sure it's working for everyone. Let's refresh it. Do operations. Messed up on our if statement. Forgot the I. Okay, now we'll refresh it. That's why it wasn't happening. So we'll do human resources. It'll update with human resources. And then if we hit choose, it will then fire off the original one and should populate with everyone. Good. So there we go. So I'm gonna end this video here, and what we'll do next time is we will connect the job title as well, and essentially that is going to be the same exact method. We can create yet another function, and then look at those two functions and find the redundancies or the added fluff, and then see about combining them into one. But I'll end this video here, and if you're enjoying what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, please take care.